So I've been doing some thinking since my last video, and you know what's even better than fact-checking someone reusing the same info for the 100th time? Well, to me that would be making a video definitively making all those other videos obsolete. And that's exactly what I set out to do, which leads us to this comprehensive overview video. And that's not a term I use lightly. One thing I've always found really noteworthy is just how little cut content Oblivion has when just glancing over the files. While Skyrim immediately greets you with test NPCs and contains about 50 unique or semi-unique unused NPCs, Oblivion has 9. This is not counting any test NPCs of course, just the unique NPCs that were once meant to be present in the world. I'm also not counting the unused stable guards from various cities, the unused Imperial guards from permanent retirement, or the corpses from the Wayward Knights, as again these are essentially just unique instances of generically named NPCs or corpses, if that makes sense to you. It's not until you start looking deeper that you come across the remnants of other NPCs, and at that point the total number gets boosted. But speaking on a purely technical level, these NPCs aren't NPCs, as they no longer exist in NPC form. They can come in a multitude of other forms. Think of the guys from Coral, whose existence is only confirmed in the form of AI packages. There are also people that only have scripts left over which mention them. Sometimes someone's leftovers give us a clear idea of what their purpose was. Or they might just have 1 or 2 mentions that give us nothing but a name to work with. The context in this case is really important, as we'll see in just a bit. With quests I have more or less the same problem, but I'll tackle that in just a moment. I think now is a good time I said fuck it and quickly addressed all of Oblivion's relevant unused NPCs. 2 of the 9 NPCs mentioned would have appeared in Coral during the quest The Assassinated Man. They are the Orc Homros Grimoire and the Redguard Wallace. While they have some minor oddities, Homros particularly as she lacks the normal shoes associated with her outfit, as well as the hyphen normally seen in Orcish last names, both she and Wallace appear to be finalized characters. They have some simple AI packages, of which I'm not sure if they were meant to have gone replaced, but that's not really that noteworthy. What is noteworthy is that we know they were supposed to be underlings of Heitz's Heart. Although at this point the information kinda dries up and we don't exactly know what their role would have been exactly. All I can say on the matter is that their dialogue, combined with unused lines for Heitz's Heart, implied you were meant to encounter them at a point during the quest that is normally not possible in the final game. As normally, Heitz's Heart isn't enabled until his confrontation with Francois Mautier, at which point it's already too late to interact with him. Speaking of Orgonian assassins though, another removed NPC is Olidai. He was meant to be a member of the Blackwood Company and he appears to be completely finished. Except for the fact that he has no AI at all, which is really strange, as normally even test NPCs have some kind of default AI package, while he just has none. And Olidai has a static level and a set inventory, which is different from most other company members that appear in the final game. The majority of the other unused NPCs were all meant to appear in the Imperial City. Gwendolyn is a quest-related NPC that was meant to appear during the retirement ceremony in the Dark Brotherhood quest Permanent Retirement. However, if you can recall, no such thing takes place in the final game. And Gwendolyn got the axe alongside the 2 aforementioned semi-unique Imperial Legion soldiers. While her AI is quite uniquely designed for her, no dialogue remains giving us any hint at her exact role. Then there's also the Orc Lundum Grogolpok, who doesn't have any clothes, dialogue or unique AI packages. He is part of the Imperial City Citizens faction and his form ID shows that he was created concurrently with Velen Andes and Damien Mages, implying he could have been meant to live at the Waterfront district as well. Slightly more finished is Riz Frelmeton, a removed ostler that once held a shop in the Market district where red diamond jewelry appears in the final game. Quite interesting, but besides the bugs he causes, there isn't much more noteworthy about him. Lurio Manius is noteworthy though, in the fact that he's a finished NPC with unique dialogue and all bells and whistles visually, but he doesn't have any unique AI at all. Just a simple basic placeholder package. Yet nothing even resembling a basic schedule, although I guess he's a step further along the ladder than Olidai. His dialogue is also quite remarkable, as it implies he lived with Matthias Draconis, the same man who in the final game does have a lodger, but that man, Collatinus Vidius, is a mysterious character as well, as despite appearing in the final game, he doesn't have any unique dialogue and his inventory is also quite weird for a normal citizen. Alas, now's not the time for that discussion. And our final Imperial City resident is a red guard by the name of Curtis. Despite Curtis saying he's a nobody, I find him fascinating, because his removal is so weird. He has unique dialogue, unique design, inventory, and a super in-depth schedule. Yeah, I'm serious. He doesn't just look like a completely realized NPC that was just cut at the final moment. No, Curtis and his AI list imply to me that the AI of the citizens in the final game was at one point meant to be way more in-depth. But the devs either found it to be a logistical nightmare, which I can imagine, encountered some engine problems, which I can also imagine, or maybe even both. Still, it's sad to see such a well-realized character go to waste like this. And for our final removed NPC, we head to the Night Mother's crypt in Breville, where we were meant to encounter a ghost named Nightchild. It's even possible that there were meant to be multiple based on the name of their AI package, and this would match up with the lore of the Night Mother's children. Again, this has some interesting implications, as to me this makes it look like the Night Mother's crypt was originally much larger, as the place in the final game could never hold multiple wandering ghosts, as well as all Dark Brotherhood members. That just seems too cluttered. So in all likelihood the place was shrunk down and the developers decided there wasn't much more need for these night kids and had them scrapped. It's also possible that before the developers chose to depict this Nightchild as a normal NPC, they wanted to have the children be monsters, as there are two types of unused creatures known as Dark Broodling. One is a will-o'-the-wisp and the other is a ghost. They are internally called Nightchild Ghost and Nightchild Wisp respectively. And there you have it. What the masses didn't want you to know. Oblivion only has a handful of relevant removed NPCs. And then we come to the quests, which is basically the same thing. Oblivion essentially only has a single cut quest, or two, depending on how you look at it. Or maybe 3, or 10, but again, that's all a matter of perspective. And that's exactly why I've decided to split these different kind of cut quests up into multiple categories, so we can better understand what exactly we know of these. Starting at the very bottom with quests that we only know of due to developer interviews, the Tallinn Warheft questline falls under this category, as Michael Kirkbride's comment is all we have to go off. There's nothing to even suggest that this questline made it further than the concepting stage. The Nobility questline also kinda falls under here. If not for Todd Howard's interview, we really wouldn't know a thing about it. Yes, we have the Nobility faction itself left over in the files, as well as internal names referring to the Count of Kvatch as a duke instead, just like Todd does in the interview, but ultimately there isn't anything in the files that could have clued us into the fact that this was actually tied to a questline. Then, also because I have to put it somewhere, are also the ideas and concepts that were later repurposed into other things. They in all likelihood would have functioned as quests, so I guess I should mention them here. Horse Armor and Holidays. These two were both concepts created for the base game, only to get stripped down and planned to be sold as DLC. Only the former ever got sold and, well, you know how the rest of the story goes. The Orrery was also either repurposed from a removed vanilla quest or made to compensate for something being cut from the game, as is the case with Maroon's Razor. Also related to this are the generic Radiant quests, which similarly met the axe and had their dialogue reused for these DLC expansions. I mean, that's not even speculation on my part, that's actual developer notes from the files. And just like Skyrim's first expansion Dawnguard, and I guess even Morrowind's Tribunal, Knights of the Nine was also very likely based on the removed concept from the base game. And I have to say, even I am always impressed by the developers coming up with cool concepts, leaving them on the table, and having basically no mention of them in the base game as to not make it jarring, and then really nicely polishing up those ideas and reintroducing them in an expansion. I honestly mean it when I say it's really cool and kinda impressive, not to mention that it always feels right and not completely totally whack or out of place. And I guess now is as good a time as any to bring up the test quests. These were made to just test stuff. Yeah, I know, real difficult concept to grasp. And just like the majority of Oblivion's testing content, while I find their inclusion interesting as a novelty, they don't really give me all that much to talk about. There are 7 of them in total. You had one to check the voice budget, one specifically made for an MTV promo, a couple just to test quests or check bugs. I get why these were made, but this stuff I'd expect to find in the files of a leak, not just sitting there in the finished game's files. Then there are also the changed or altered quests. These are the ones most people are likely familiar with. You know, the ones you hear rumors from in the final game that don't correspond with actual quests. Take for example MS-11 in Bruma, where Hafid mentions that Lyra Rosentia collects Akavari artifacts, despite, that not being the case. This quest appears to have not changed in concept, but it was instead just given to the Countess, rather than a random citizen, making Lyra an inconsequential NPC in the final game. A fun fact about her though, she has an AI package which reveals an earlier name for her, Selena Picentia, or at the very least, this could have been an earlier name for her. Might have also been the case that she got this package from a removed NPC by this name. With AI packages, it's kinda hard to tell, If your ref changes name, that clearly shows that this particular linked NPC used that early name. If your first name changes but your last name doesn't, that's also pretty conclusive. In this case, you can kinda make the argument that it seems unlikely that Lyra would use a totally random NPC's package, but it isn't that uncommon in these games. At least we have that bit of context to go off. Look at our man Borogond here. Is this a completely unused NPC? Is it an earlier name for Bongond? Is it just a typo? Again, that's not uncommon, but due to this package going completely unused, it's really hard to tell what exactly the purpose here was. In the same vein, we also have MS-05, Through a Nightmare Darkly. In the final game though, it's quite clear that this quest was originally completely different, as it involved Drochanji and some Daedra. Also, unlike the quest with Lyra, this one seems to have been cleaned up quite a bit, as the giver of the rumor, Gilgondarin, has a second reveal topic that doesn't mention the quest whatsoever, so it was likely recorded at a later date. And besides this line of dialogue from Gilgondarin, there is only a marker and an AI package left over of this earlier iteration. Also, unlike Lyra, Droshanji isn't just some inconsequential NPC. He has been fully incorporated into the world and has unique dialogue to boot. The last quest remnant in the form of a rumor comes from the Fighters Guild. Related to the Trolls of Forsaken Mine. Except not in Forsaken Mine, and instead related to the Blankenmarch contract. We have clear evidence that the death scene of Virnus was originally set in the Aelid Ruin of Vayant rather than Forsaken Mine. This is one of those changes that seems to have happened quite late in development, and quite shoddily, as not only do you have unique trolls in a random ruin, but you also have completely random village that's now pointless, as well as a nonsense rumor and many markers that are completely irrelevant still pointing to the removal. Very strange indeed. Of all the guilds and factions in the final game, the Fighters Guild easily has the most, or at the very least the most obvious cuts, like Azan's quest still mentioning him being located in such. It seems like this questline was conceived very early, but got hacked up and evolved alongside the game. Just like Skyrim, the Thieves Guild has the least amount of noteworthy or obvious cuts, which I feel is nice. People think pretty fondly of Oblivion's Thieves Guild, I'm pretty sure. And then we have the quests that we know actually exist at some point because they still have relevant leftovers in the files. One of these being MS-19, which likely got repurposed wholesale into the Mages Guild quest Fingers of the Mountain, which also serves as the call recommendation quest. Very weird, that one. Then there's also MS-25, you may know it as the one with the unmarked cave and the Black Queen. Keep in mind that this chest is the only thing we have still confirming the fact that this quest once existed. And I guess we can also place the infamous Imperial Express quest in this category. It still has some remnants left in the final game, although nothing ever comes of it. And while I'm not 100% certain, it's very, very likely that this was a Radiant repeatable quest, and just like the other random generic quest setup, this one got the axe. There are also quests of which absolutely nothing remains, but we have to assume that they existed at one point, due to Oblivion's quest numbering system. When you just look at the listing, miscellaneous quests 1, 3, 7, 15, 20 and more, they're all just missing. And they don't have a single scrap of content left over anywhere. That's kinda crazy when you think about it. In fact, if we just count quests by missing numbers, there is a total of 56 missing. After miscellaneous quest number 52, we just jump straight to 91. I mean, what? I don't even know what seems crazier. That they actually cut that many quests, or that they would just make that jump randomly. No, that can't be the case, right? They had to have cut something. Although I can't imagine what. Even if we counted such as having a standard of say 6 quests starting there, that would still leave about 30 quests unaccounted for. Maybe there was some other metric involved, such as the training quests being counted under miscellaneous? I don't know, but it is something very weird to think about. I also made a little category for the oddities that either can be conclusively linked to their own quest, don't have any real evidence supporting them being tied to a quest, or have no evidence whatsoever. The first thing I'm gonna mention here is Owen's note. I addressed it previously, but this note has no relation to any cut content whatsoever. Yes, it hints at a relation that is never addressed in game, but that's not even that out of the ordinary for Bethesda. While I can't confirm it, I am almost completely certain this note was created simply to cover up the fact that Owen was lifted from Coral and give him a bit of backstory outside of the arena matches. Lazari Milvan's duel is also one I often see cited. Again, I don't believe that this actually would have been related to a quest, although it is possible that Sir Lazar originally had a more in-depth city topic allowing you to actually duel him. These city topics got simplified in the final game, and with that I assumed this portion of Lazari's character as well. Nerastral's house, you know, the weird manor in Skingrad with the undead. Yeah, while there is no actual evidence tying this place to a removed quest, even I am inclined to say that there was meant to be a quest there, even if there is nothing confirming that. Biralorn the Necromancer in Anvil has a similar story. There are many bits and pieces pointing to cut content and in all likelihood a quest, but nothing to actually confirm that quest's existence. Strantis' quest. This is just a hunch based on rumors, but it seems very likely that this removed Coral NPC would have once been the quest giver for one of the removed Coral quests. Speaking of Coral, there's also that whole thing with the Oak Enclosure, which in all likelihood was one of Coral's removed miscellaneous quests. We have just enough evidence to confirm there's an unused quest at play here, but not quite enough to exactly slot it in. The same goes for Jugal Ballad and his Mythic Dawn postulates. There clearly was something cut here, but was it just a part of the main quest, or was it yet another miscellaneous quest? The former seems a lot more likely, but again, we don't have definitive proof of that. And there's also the topics under Divine Guidance. Again, these seem to be either a part of the main quest, but they might have also been related to something else. Maybe they're even leftovers of the original concept of having more presence of the 9 divines in the game. Who knows? I certainly don't, as there's simply not enough to go off. And then we finally arrive at the quests that go completely unused, yet still remain in quest form in the game's files. And like I said before, if you want to be nitpicky about it, there are actually 3 of these. The first is the E3 quest, and like I said in the previous video, I will say it again here, these kind of quests that are specifically made for trade shows, I view them the same as I view test quests. Of course they're technically different, as testing content isn't supposed to ever be shown to the public, while trade show content is polished to perfection to only show particular things to a specific audience. We can see as much in the behind the scenes documentary. However, both aren't actually all that representative of the final game, and neither were ever meant to be included inside the final game. I hope you can understand my reasoning here. Oh, and let me also explain that when I say the quest is still in the files in quest form, I do mean that quite literally. The quest itself is still there, but almost nothing of its content still remains in the files. So it's basically broken and useless, as is to be expected, as this kind of stuff should normally get deleted after the trade show. The next good quest is arguably the one most Oblivion fans will be familiar with, Geraldine Dorn's Ogre quest, internally known as MS-17. This quest is quite strange, and I don't mean that because of its subject matter, no, rather because of the state it was cut in. Because clearly a lot of work was put into this. Not only does the quest itself remain, albeit without any sort of name, we have full journal entries, unique AI packages, unused player dialogue topics, rumors, location data, scripting, but most importantly, all, and I do mean all, of Geraldine's dialogue is just sitting there in the files. It either never had or no longer has entries in the construction set for the lines, but they're all there, properly voiced, named and edited. Now, of course, we don't have everything. The scripting either wasn't finished entirely or was partially deleted, and not all of Jurlen's AI packages seem to be present, or maybe they just never got finalized, as they bear the telltale signs of being testing packages, being prefixed with XXX, instead of the proper quest ID, like one of his packages. But I guess the most major thing we're missing here, besides the quest name of course, is all of Ariella Doran's dialogue. Jurlen's wife would have played a minor role in setting the player on the right track after he went missing during the quest. This much is known from the localized versions of Oblivion that still include her dialogue, and a lot of interesting minor differences as far as I'm aware. I haven't actually checked those versions of the game myself. And now you're probably wondering, what could possibly be the third unused quest? Well, I'm sorry if I got your hopes up, but it's actually kind of a part of Jurlen's quest. Yes, the last quest is called MS-17 Finn. This is actually just a basic quest that runs behind the scenes to update some things that the game can't control anymore after the normal MS-17 quest shuts down. Most of the time, these quests function to update a particular NPC's dialogue upon quest completion. There are many other examples of this to be found in the game, such as MS-22 Finn, which is the equivalent for the quest Nothing You Can Possess, and it, among others, updates Umbecano's dialogue. MS-17 Finn would have likely served to do at least one thing, and that's update all of Jurlen's dialogue topics to reflect on the quest event. And while I currently haven't confirmed this, it's likely that Ariella's dialogue was similarly meant to get updated. Of course, due to the dialogue not having any entries in the construction set, this quest is just kinda empty in the files. But once again, the fact that this quest to update an inconsequential NPC's dialogue upon quest completion already existed shows to me that Jurlen's quest was quite far along, possibly even fully finished by the time it was cut. And I honestly can't tell you why. It's not like it has some horrible implications like 3 kids committing patricide, and I haven't really known Bethesda to cut quests due to lore or story concerns, so maybe this was just a case of time management? Or maybe they encountered some bugs they couldn't fix in time? Who knows? I do feel like this quest would have fitted in fantastically. Having it is at least better than having 2 broken, worthless NPCs at the very least. And yeah, that was a bit of an in-depth overview of all of Oblivion's removed NPCs and cut or altered quests. And I haven't even addressed the completely overhauled main quest line yet, as that has enough content there for a whole other video. Hopefully you learned at least something interesting today. Maybe I even missed or overlooked something. If that's the case, please feel free to let me know. And hopefully neither you nor I, especially I, see any more of this regurgitated slop pass by in the near future. Thanks. I've been Anon G, and I'm out.